Welcome to Leading the Conversation from NAMI, Northern Illinois. My name is Warren Boykin, and I am the Program and Outreach Coordinator since October of last year. And before we get started with our main program today, I'd like to give you a few updates of what's going on here at our busy center. First of all, it's not too late to join us May 5th. Beginning at 5 p.m. at the UW Health Sports Factory, where you'll hear two powerful stories that become one to promote hope, healing, and community. This is the Building Bridges event with Kevin Briggs and Kevin Berthia. On May 9th, we'll hold our annual membership and community meeting at Stepping Stones Counseling Center, beginning at 5:30 p.m. on mental health law. Bring your questions. And we have a Pizza Ranch fundraiser coming up on May 10th from 4 to 7 p.m. in Roscoe as a part of Mental Health Awareness Month. Finally, our annual fundraiser is in the works. It will be hosted June 5th at Forest Hills Country Club. There's still time to register a team for golf from Mulligan's for mental illness. If you don't golf, don't worry. You can sign up to have dinner, listen to music, and learn more about why we do the work we do at the After Hours event. But now, without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to our presenters this afternoon, who will explore with us the basic models of human behavior and provide de-escalation skills for each stage of the escalation cycle. First, Christy Sung-Stardy holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology from Northern Illinois University and graduated summa cum laude. She has 10 years of professional experience in a variety of inpatient and outpatient settings in the behavioral health field. Christy's skills include case management, completing treatment plans, performing mental health assessments, facilitating group therapy, conducting individual counseling, medical billing, and credentialing. She's worked with a variety of clients across the lifespan, including special populations such as the elderly with dementia, individuals with substance use disorders, survivors of trauma, veterans, individuals with mental health conditions, individuals with developmental disabilities, and children with autism. Christy also holds a current CADC certificate. Alongside Christy, we have Annie Hose Ryan. Annie, whose pronouns are she, her, and hers, has a master's degree in politics and government from Illinois State University. She's currently shopping around for a PhD program in political psychology, though her dream career is writer and motivational speaker. She has a 14-year-old son with both an ADHD and an autism spectrum diagnosis. Daily, she battles borderline personality disorder and complex post-traumatic stress disorder, as well as depression and anxiety. She is happily divorced, an avid nonfiction reader, a singer-performer, and unapologetically advocates for mental health in her workplace and beyond. If anyone has any questions during this webinar, please add them into the Q&A feature, and we will facilitate those at the end of our presentation. Christy and Annie will now hand it over to you. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, Warren.
Thank you.
All right.
Why is this one okay? Oh, cool.
There we go. Okay, so this is my part. A word from a mom who is living it. Do I look at the owl, right? Okay, just making sure. So I'm Annie, the mom, and I have 3 things to say that I will elaborate on. 1, it's okay that you're not okay. 2, radically accept your sphere of influence. And 3, set boundaries with those who offer advice that just doesn't work for your life. And before we get started, let's talk about why we need to know these strategies. My teen son has an ADHD diagnosis, an autism diagnosis, and an oppositional defiant diagnosis. I'm gonna say it for the parents who are afraid to say it. I'm straight up afraid of my own kid when he gets angry. And now that he's a teenager and taller than me, when he gets in one of his moods and he's verbally abusive to me, I have to just walk away from the situation. Because if I don't, I get angry and it escalates to the point that his dad has to come get him. And then I feel like a crap mom, which being a mother's hard enough, right? So I know what it's like to be so furious and triggered that you snap on somebody. And I've cut out every single person in my life who treats me that way. Then puberty happened, and now I have a son who is that way. I also have a sneaking suspicion that I'm not the only single mother afraid of her teenage son when he exhibits the same abusive behaviors as his father. I was afraid of him too. So my son gets away with continuing this behavior toward me because I'm afraid of my own kid and what he'll do if he gets boiling mad. So what do we do? I mean, no one seems to really have a good answer to this. My therapist told me to call the police if he starts swinging. Well, the last time the police ended up in our lives, DCFS also got involved and I almost lost my job. Now, I'm a single mom who had to cut off her own family. I need that job. So no matter how bad he gets, I don't want the criminal legal system in our lives again. Side note, I refuse to call it criminal justice because it's not justice. Justice would be proper mental health care and training, but that's a song for another time. They do more harm than good in situations like this because they don't know how to handle adolescent children with serious mental illness, aside from locking them up or taking them from their families. And that often doesn't help the behavior, it just makes it worse. So what do we do? I've had to just walk away before it comes to blows. And friends who mean well tell me, don't let him treat you that way. Take away his phone, take away his laptop, take away his whatever. Okay, thanks. And what do I do when he flips into a rage because I took his stuff and he starts swinging at me? I don't know. I just get blank stares after that. So it's like, we need a better way. Maybe don't give advice if you've not been in the situation yourself. What works for your neurotypical kid with mild depression and anxiety is not going to work for mine. We need a better way. This is for the parents who are given advice that won't work for their kid. These parents are exhausted and scared and beaten down by a system that does not serve their families. I cannot stress this enough. And if you're a brown family, your child is more likely to get killed by a police officer than helped by one. It's okay to feel so fried. It's okay to feel like this is a hopeless situation because it's like living in a war zone with a human of your own creation. Making peace with what you can't control is the first key to surviving this life with a child who has serious mental illness. This is radical acceptance. Some of you may have heard the phrase, it is what it is. Well, that's radically accepting your situation no matter what it is. Because honestly, it's your reality whether you freak out about it or not. And it's a lot easier to deal with it if you're able to maintain your calm. And the one thing you can control is the way you respond. You can also control the information you seek out to make the best decisions for you and your family. Another thing you can control, telling people their advice is not helpful and to please stop. Now that's a loaded request as you can't control their responses to that boundary. So stick with us, shameless plug, for a forthcoming seminar on how to establish and maintain boundaries with people. We don't have time for that today. That's a whole thing. This presentation is very technical, and it's okay if a lot of it leaves you scratching your head because I'm helping present it and some of it has me scratching my own head. That's why Christy is so good at what she does. She understands it, she lives it, she practices it. This is also a lengthy presentation. There may not be time for questions. So please know that you can reach out to NAMI Northern Illinois with questions, and those questions will be relayed to us, and we'll do our best to answer them and provide additional resources. All right. So this is me. Introduction. De-escalation is an essential skill set utilized in crisis situations or other situations in which a person becomes agitated or dysregulated, a poorly regulated mood. This presentation is geared toward caregivers, but can also benefit a general audience. Handling escalated situations is difficult. The natural reaction is the fight or flight response, such as getting upset or wanting to escape the situation. However, in order to successfully de-escalate someone, you need to be conscientious of how you react to the escalated situation and how you interact with the escalated person. This presentation will discuss general and escalation cycle stage-specific de-escalation techniques.
Okay, but first, before we discuss de-escalation techniques, we should examine human behavior in general. So a lot of times I'll hear from parents who say, and this presentation isn't just for, I know we mentioned like autism in children quite a bit. It's not just for autistic children. This describes all behaviors and it applies to all behaviors. But we use that as an example because I think that's what a lot of people struggle with. So a lot of times especially when parents look at their kids' behaviors, they think that it just kind of comes out of nowhere, or they say, well, my kid goes from 0 to 100. Or, you know, sometimes if they ask their kids, or even, you know, when people ask each other, well, why'd you do that? You know, the typical answer is, I don't know, right? So, you know, let's look at this. Do behaviors really come out of nowhere? Are they really unknowable? We just can't figure them out? Is that true, or is it not? You know, so that's why there's the guy with the magnifying glass. Really what I'm challenging you guys to do is to be like a detective, you know, so really looking at a behavior and saying, you know, what is going on here, you know, being really detailed, you know, almost nitpicky with the details, and just really analyzing, you know, what's really going on. So let's talk about behaviors. This is called the antecedent behavior consequence, or ABC model. It is used heavily in ABA, that's applied behavior analysis. Sorry, it's a lot of acronyms. ABA is a proven effective therapy for people with autism. But like I said, this model isn't just about autism, it is for all behaviors. So, you know, let's look at behaviors, the middle circle. Right now, what is a behavior? So the way the model defines behavior is any observable action or speech. So a lot of times when we think of behaviors, you know, we refer to them in a negative connotation, like, well, he's having a behavior, you know, but really with this model, behaviors can be positive or negative or neutral. And the other thing is, it's always a choice. So it may not feel like a choice to the person who is engaging in the behavior, but it is a choice. So what is a behavior? So I'm willing to bet that you're all doing a behavior right now. And you might be thinking, I'm not doing anything right now. Sure, you know, you're all on this Zoom call, right? So anybody who walks into the room that you're in can see that you're on a Zoom call. That is a behavior. So again, it's not really negative or positive. I mean, it probably is positive, but definitely not negative, right? But that is behavior. So I'm just challenging to think of things in a different way, you know, so that could be behavior, right? And then, so let's look at consequences. So a lot of times when we think of consequences, again, we think of it in the negative light, like, you know, like as in punishment, for example, you know, like, oh, if you do X, Y, Z, you're going to get consequences, right? But consequences can include punishment, but it doesn't have to. It could be something positive or neutral, or just it basically is something that comes immediately after the behavior. So for example, in the example of you being on the Zoom call, that behavior, what's the consequence of that? Well, you know, after you finish with the Zoom call, you might have learned something, you know, so that would be the consequence. So now let's look at the antecedent, that first circle. So that is what comes immediately before the behavior. And it can be internal or external. So what do I mean by internal or external? So internal is something that's happening inside of the person who ends up displaying or engaging in whatever behavior it is. So for example, if you're hungry, okay, that would be an antecedent. That's an internal antecedent. So nobody can really see that you're hungry. It's just something you feel on the inside. So maybe the behavior would be, well, you go eat something. And then the consequence would be you feel full or you feel better, right? An external antecedent is something that happens in your environment. So let's say you have two kids playing and one kid takes the toy of one of the other kid, and the kid who had the toy taken away has a meltdown. So that would be an external antecedent. You can see what happened. Like you can see one kid taking the other kid's toy away. So it's pretty obvious what happened. Now with internal antecedents, sometimes it's hard to tell because we're not mind readers after all. So that is the ABC model. It kind of underlies everything that we're talking about. And let's see.
No, it's you still.
Okay, so the escalation cycle. So like I said, crises and other dysregulated behavior don't come out of nowhere. It's a process, although the individual may progress through the stages very quickly, which can make it seem like the person is going from 0 to 100, but it is a process. And that picture on the slide is a representation of that process. So it's also not necessary to go through all stages of the escalation cycle. The process can be stopped in the early stages. So we will discuss intervention in the next section. So let's look closely at the escalation cycle. So as I mentioned previously, essentially every escalated behavior follows this pattern, even though each stage may take different lengths of time. You can always stop it too at the early stages, but it all follows this pattern. So the first stage is calm. The person is displaying appropriate and cooperative behavior. This is just kind of the starting point. So first to start out calm, and then the next stage, there's a trigger. So the trigger essentially is the antecedent from the ABC model that we just discussed. Again, it can be internal or external. And then triggers are unique to each individual. So what may upset one person may not upset another person. And then once somebody is triggered, we move on to the next stage, that's agitation. So at the agitation stage, the individual starts becoming upset. Responses may be emotional in nature, and the individual may appear restless, display off-task behavior, vocalize concerns, or appear disengaged. Okay, so moving along, after agitation, we have the acceleration stage. In the acceleration stage, the individual continues to escalate. So, as you can see, there's a buildup, The individual may question and argue, try to provoke others, not follow directions, or make threats. So then we get to the peak stage. That is probably what most people recognize as like a meltdown, because that is, the most obvious. Some of these early stages is maybe hard to tell what's going on. When you get to peak, you can really tell what's going on. So at this stage, the individual has lost all control. Safety is a major concern at this stage, and the individual may engage in physical aggression, property destruction, or self-injurious behaviors. So the peak stage every one of these stages can last. It just depends on the person and the situation. I've seen peak stages last up to 2 hours. They can certainly last longer, I'm sure, or they can be very brief. So basically after the peak stage, the person essentially loses steam. So we get to the de-escalation stage where the person begins to calm down and gets less agitated. They may be confused, disoriented, embarrassed, or just tired, because they've just expended all this energy at the peak stage. And now they're it's kind of winding down, they lose steam. And then the very last stage is recovery. That's when the individual returns to being calm. So, let's see.
All right, this one's me. The escalation cycle, introduction to intervention. The escalation cycle progresses naturally. In other words, the person who becomes agitated or dysregulated will eventually calm down on their own. However, intervention is needed to maintain the safety of the dysregulated individual, yourself, and others around the individual. How and when do you intervene? In order to achieve the best results, how and when you respond will largely depend on which stage of the escalation cycle the person is in. But first, let's discuss some general de-escalation techniques. Still me?
Yeah.
General de-escalation techniques, staying calm. That's so hard. A crisis situation is stressful for everyone involved, and it's natural to become agitated along with the escalated person. It's literally human nature. However, it is imperative that you stay calm throughout the process. Staying calm will allow you to think clearly and be better able to respond to the person's challenging behaviors. Here are some calming techniques.
Okay, so there's at the very last slide of this presentation, there is a link to a Google Docs or Google document that has all the information presented on this slide, like with step-by-step instructions and everything, that it would be a good idea to download and just kind of save that for yourself. So if you get just one thing out of this presentation, please let it be this. Calming skills they really begin and end. Everything begins and ends with calming skills. So what are calming skills? Relaxation skills help relieve negative feelings. As with learning any skill, practice makes perfect. Most of these skills I think all of them are easy to learn, but getting good at them and practicing them, that's a little more challenging. So you should start practicing these skills when things are going well, so that you can use these skills effectively when things are not going well. So I'm gonna talk about each of these calming skills, and then we're gonna practice the body scan, because I think that is the one that can be applicable to any situation you're in. It can be done anywhere. You don't need any materials. You don't need materials for really any of this stuff. So first we have slow breathing. There's a lot of different varieties of it, like square breathing, circle breathing. Basically it's just, I guess most people think of like, oh, I should be doing deep breathing. That's what the conventional wisdom is, but really slow breathing has been shown to be more effective. So we'll just go over square breathing as an example. So with square breathing, first you would slowly exhale all the air in your lungs. Then you would gently breathe through your nose to a count of 4. Hold your breath to a count of 4. And then gently exhale through your mouth to a slow count of 4. And then finally, you hold your breath to a count of 4. So that is just one example of slow breathing that's very effective and taught widely. And then another form of breathing we have is diaphragmatic breathing. So the diaphragmatic breath is the most relaxing breath. Often we breathe using our chest, but this is to oxygenate our brains as well as breathing with your diaphragm. So when I tell people about diaphragmatic breathing, a lot of times when people like run, if they're like a runner or a jogger, they are already familiar with this, because when you run, you have to breathe in a different way. So diaphragmatic breathing, you can practice this lying down, sitting, or standing up. Place one hand on your chest and one hand on your stomach. So you would practice breathing in a way that moves the hand on your stomach, but not the one on your chest. So we're going to get into body scan now. Please follow along with me as I read the instructions. So it may help to close your eyes, but you don't have to. This works best sitting or lying down. So first you would start with your feet. Just notice them non-judgmentally. Just going to focus on your feet. Notice them non-judgmentally. Ask yourself whether your feet are relaxed. If not, consciously relax them. Now we're going to move on to your legs. Notice them non-judgmentally. Ask yourself whether your legs are relaxed. If not, consciously relax them. Now you're going to move on to your back. Notice it non-judgmentally. Ask yourself whether your back is relaxed. If not, consciously relax it. Now we're going to move on to your chest. Notice it non-judgmentally. Ask yourself whether your chest is relaxed. If not, consciously relax it. Now we're going to move on to your shoulders. Notice them non-judgmentally. Ask yourself whether your shoulders are relaxed. If not, consciously relax them. Now we're going to move on to your arms. Notice them non-judgmentally. Ask yourself whether your arms are relaxed. If not, consciously relax them. Next, we're going to move on to your hands. Notice them non-judgmentally. Ask yourself whether your hands are relaxed. If not, consciously relax them. Then we're going to move on to your neck. Notice it non-judgmentally. Ask yourself whether your neck is relaxed. If not, consciously relax it. Now we're going to move on to your jaw. Notice it non-judgmentally. Ask yourself whether your jaw is relaxed. If not, consciously relax it. Now we're going to move on to your eyes. Notice them non-judgmentally. Ask yourself whether your eyes are relaxed. If not, consciously relax them. And finally, we're going to move on to your forehead. Notice it non-judgmentally. Ask yourself whether your forehead is relaxed. If not, consciously relax it. So I'd like you to take a moment, just think to yourself about how you feel now versus how you felt before we started this exercise. So the next calming technique is progressive muscle relaxation. And this is actually very similar to a body scan. It goes through all the body parts. It's essentially the same thing, but the only exception is that instead of just relaxing each muscle, you will tense it first and then relax it. Now, a very important note for this is that please only tense your muscles enough to where you feel they are tense, and then just kind of relax them. You know, you don't want to over tense your muscles. That's really important. Just be very careful not to over tense your muscles. So I'm not going to go over this in detail because I just went over the body scan. But if you download that link with the Google Docs, it will give you ideas on how to tense each body part. So let's say if you're working on your feet, you might want to gently curl your toes to tense your feet, and then you would relax them. So I'll let you absorb that on your own time. The next calming technique is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is actually a really good to use with children, but it can be used by anybody. So basically, essentially, we're looking at the 5 senses. So for the 5, you would look around and notice 5 things you can see and name them. And then for the 4, you would explore 4 things you can touch right now. You know, maybe your hands resting on your leg or something. You know, what does your pants feel like? What does the fabric feel like? What is it? Can you feel yourself touching your leg? Can your leg feel your hand touching it? You know, things like that. What does that feel like? You know, now for the 3, you would notice 3 things you can hear. What do they sound like? Are they loud or soft? And then for the 2, you would look for 2 things you can smell right now. What does it smell like? And then for 1, you would focus on 1 thing you can taste. So if you're not eating something right now, you can just simply be mindful of what the inside of your mouth tastes like. Right. so the next calming technique is visualization or a guided meditation. This is probably the easiest one to start with if you have no experience with calming techniques. This is probably the easiest one to start with because you don't really have to do anything. You just kind of follow along with the instructions. So you don't have to take it upon yourself. You're like, I gotta relax my feet now. You don't have to do that. You just follow along with the video. So there's lots of videos online on visualization. YouTube has tons. There's also calming apps that offer visualization and guided meditations. So basically, like I said, you follow along with the voice on the video. You can certainly do this on your own, but I think the easiest way is to follow along with it. So basically the purpose of visualization is to mentally place yourself in another place and notice all the details of your imaginary environment. So what do you feel? What do you hear? What do you see? What do you taste? What do you smell? So the example I gave is a beach visualization. It certainly doesn't have to be a beach. It could be anywhere you want. And this one I just kind of made up. It's not based on one that's actually out there as a video form. So let's say we're doing a beach visualization. You would close your eyes and imagine yourself barefoot on a beautiful beach on a warm summer day. So feel the sand beneath your feet or beneath your feet and between your toes. What does the sand feel like? Hear the roar of the ocean. Pay attention to how the sound changes during each wave. Hear the seagulls flying by. What do they sound like? Feel the warm sun beaming down on you. How does it make you feel? Look at the sky. What does it look like? So that's just an example of a visualization. I mean, there's so many variations on that that have been done. It's just basically putting yourself in a different place and getting involved in that environment. So next we come to mindfulness as a calming technique. Now the thing is that most people have heard about mindfulness, but they're probably a little, sparse on the details. And also it probably sounds like a big to do, and it's really not. So mindfulness is simply focused attention. So you might think this is too hard to try, but really you've probably been mindful in the past without realizing it. Have you ever been so absorbed in a movie or TV show that you forgot you were staring at a screen? Have you ever been so absorbed in a book that you forgot you were reading printed words on paper? So if you've had these experiences, then you've been mindful before. You can do anything mindfully, such as eating or walking. I would not recommend mindful driving, safety issues, but you can literally do any activity mindfully. So I'll just give you an example of mindful eating to kind of help you, think of things in a different way, really. That's what it is. So, a lot of times we multitask and eating is no exception. Like I'm guilty of eating when I'm driving all the time, or we talk with our table mates when we eat. We're often in a hurry and we scarf down our food. But when you're mindfully eating, you're focusing solely on the act of eating and you don't participate in other activities. So let me just give you a step-by-step of how mindful eating works, just so you can get what I'm talking about here. So when you're eating mindfully, first you would take a bite of your food and keep it in your mouth without chewing it yet. Notice the temperature of the food. How does it feel in your mouth? Explore the food with your tongue. What does the roof of your mouth feel like? Is any of it stuck to the roof of your mouth, for example? And what does the food taste like? What does it smell like? What textures do you detect? Okay, now once you've done that, then you slowly begin to chew and you notice which jaw muscles you are using while you are chewing. Does the flavor, smell, or texture change while you're chewing? Do you feel the urge to swallow? And now you will go ahead and swallow the bite of food. What does it feel like sliding down your throat? What is the taste, smell, or mouthfeel that you are left with? Are you full yet? Okay, and then you would just, keep repeating this until you're done eating, I guess. And then, afterwards, think about it. How does your mindful eating experience differ from your usual eating experience? So it's, most people who have done this are like, yeah, that was totally different. It was a totally different experience from just scarfing down my food.
And may I say that I battle an eating disorder, and mindful eating saves me so much. It keeps me from binging when life gets hard. So
yeah, it sure does. And I also used to have eating disorder, and yeah, this is it's definitely something you want to try, So the next calming technique on the list is meditation. So I'm sure we've all heard of meditation, and there's a lot of variations to it, and it's not hard to learn, but it definitely takes practice. So the way what I have presented here is the traditional meditation, and I wrote it out in just 4 steps. It's really not that complicated, but just getting good at it, that's the hard part. So if you're starting to meditate, you've never meditated before, I would only try it for maybe a few minutes, set a timer, like 2 minutes, 5 minutes, just a short amount of time, just so you can get used to actually doing it. So the first step is just to sit or lie down comfortably. The second step is to close your eyes. Well, we're already halfway done, right? And then what you would do is you would focus on your breathing while breathing naturally. So this is not like that, the square breathing we did or anything like that, where you're doing something, you're forcing your breath or you're doing something unnatural with your breath. This is just how you breathe naturally. Just focus on that. Make sure you don't hold your breath or force your breath, just your natural breathing. And then the last step is, if any thoughts enter your mind, notice them non-judgmentally and then let go of them. Return your focus onto your breathing. And you would just repeat this step anytime you encounter thoughts. And that's all there is to meditation. But getting good at it is more of a challenge. So we get to the last calming technique, which I think maybe a lot of people haven't heard, is called a half smile. The picture of the Mona Lisa is there for your reference. So the half smile relaxes your face and shoulder muscles and promotes a positive mood. Basically, you want to smile just like the Mona Lisa does. It's a very slight smile where the corners of your mouth turn slightly up. So essentially, you want to smile to the point where you can feel you're smiling, but not to where you can really see it if you're in front of a mirror. So in the mirror, you might see like a really tiny smile, but it doesn't really look like you're smiling. That's the half smile right there.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay. General de-escalation techniques. Body language. Your body language should be relaxed and open. Your arms should be uncrossed. Maintain good eye contact without staring. Just when you're autistic, that's hard to do. It's really awkward. Position your body so that it mirrors that of the person who is escalated. If they are standing, you should stand too. If they're sitting, you should also be sitting. Stay at least an arm's length away from the escalated individual in case they start swinging, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
And also because a lot of people are, I think as Americans, like we're not comfortable with close. Yeah, people being close, I mean, different
Right.
cultures have a different, I guess, bubble. But most people, like in America, it's that, you got to put your arms out and it's that's the bubble. So when you invade somebody's personal space, they're probably going to get uncomfortable. So if someone's already agitated, you don't want to make them more uncomfortable. That's essentially what that comes down to. So next one is another general de-escalation technique is active listening. So it is important for the escalated person to be heard or to feel heard, especially in the early stages of the escalation cycle. Active listening is a technique that shows the other person you are attentive to what they are saying and communicates empathy. Your body language should be relaxed and open while maintaining good eye contact. You should be attentive to what the other person is saying. You should listen to them instead of hearing them. So what do I mean by summarizing, paraphrasing without parroting? So I would say like the main active listening technique is summarizing. So if someone tells you something, let's say you're at work and your coworker tells you her daughter is homesick with the flu. Okay, you wouldn't repeat back exactly what you're saying, like, oh, your daughter's sick with the flu. That when people hear someone parroting them or repeating back what they're saying word for word, they might think you're making fun of them, or they might think you're not really paying attention. When you summarize or paraphrase, you might say something like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that, having the flu is no fun. So if you say that, the other person will be able to tell that you heard them correctly because you summarize what they said. And also they feel like you're empathizing with them, that you understand how they feel. So another general de-escalation technique is assertive communication. Now, this is actually like a huge topic on its own, but I'm just kind of giving a brief overview of it here. Assertive communication is a useful technique, especially in the early stages of the escalation cycle and in the recovery stage. So there's 3 types of communication. There's aggressive, assertive, and passive. And I guess the best way to describe assertive communication is to say what it's not. So assertive communication is neither passive nor aggressive, but is rather a balanced approach that demonstrates respect towards the other person, as well as respect towards yourself. In assertive communication, you clearly state your needs, including expectations of what you would like the other person to do, while also demonstrating that you are empathetic to the other person's perspective. Seek a compromise if possible, rather than telling the person what they need to do, which is aggressive communication, or giving into their demands, which is passive communication. So what do I mean by that? Let's give an example. So we'll set the scene by saying you live with your roommate and the garbage is piled up really high in your house, and it's your roommate's turn to do the garbage, and he just came home from work. So, there's really a number of ways you can communicate to your roommate that you like the garbage taken out, right? So if you say to your roommate something like, take out the garbage. Now, that would be aggressive communication. So does it communicate what you want? Sure, it's pretty clear what you want, but is it being respectful towards your roommate? No. Okay, so you might not get a good response from him because of that. What if you said something like, the garbage stinks? Okay, so that would be passive communication. Is it clear what you want? Not really. Is it effective? Are you going to be able to get what you want out of it? Probably not. What if your roommate just said, yeah, the garbage sure does stink, because it stinks, and walks away? You're not going to be able to get the performance you want out of your roommate, right? So if you said something to your roommate like, I understand you just got home from work and you're tired, but when you get a chance, could you please take out the garbage, because it's your turn to do so? Now, if we said something like that, that would be assertive communication. That shows you are empathetic to your roommate. You understand he just got home from work and he's tired, but you still really like him to take out the garbage. So it is respectful to your roommate and to yourself, and it's clear what you want, and it's going to be more effective to get him to do what you want him to do. So again, with this, any communication skill, there's also a nonverbal aspect of it. Nonverbal assertive communication skills include using a clear and calm tone of voice and using good eye contact.
Okay, a note about the escalation cycle. Note that it may be difficult to identify each stage of the escalation cycle as the dysregulated behavior is occurring. Observation over time and through multiple escalation cycles will help you learn the behaviors, the individual's unique behavioral patterns. Then you can tailor your response to best benefit the individual. Well, I live that. You may even get to the point where you can stop the escalation cycle at an earlier stage before the peak stage. That is definitely ideal. We will now go through techniques and responses for each stage of the escalation cycle.
Okay, so we're gonna look at each. These are the stage specific de-escalation techniques. So we're gonna look at the calm stage first. So like I mentioned before, when the individual is calm, this is the best time to teach them self-regulation skills, including the relaxation techniques previously discussed. Once the person has grasped these skills, then it is possible to then remind them to utilize these skills when they start to become escalated. The calm stage is also a good time to identify and discuss triggers, including a plan to avoid triggers if possible, and to self-regulate once a person becomes triggered. So I think a good analogy for this is like fire safety. Now, you would not wait until a fire has broken out to start developing your fire safety plan. That's not the right time. Everyone should already be prepared so that when a fire does break out, everyone knows where to go, what to do, who to call, right? You already want to have that plan in place. It's the same thing here. If you're waiting until someone is at the peak stage, you'd be like, oh, we gotta do relaxation skills. That's not gonna be the right time. They're not probably not really gonna respond well to that, if at all. So you want to be prepared and start practicing this while the person is calm. So the trigger stage. Now, when we talked before about external, internal triggers, external triggers are more obvious. Like in that example I gave where the kid's taking the other kid's toy. You can see that happen. Now, internal triggers, not so much. We're not mind readers after all. So oftentimes it takes observing the individual through many cycles of escalated behavior to identify their unique triggers. Once you know the person's triggers and you are able to notice when the individual is triggered, you can remind them to use calming techniques or redirect them towards an alternative activity. If intervention is conducted successfully, the escalation cycle can be stopped.
All right, the next step is,
Oh, sorry, I went too fast. Sorry.
the next step of the escalation cycle is the agitation stage. Now, the agitation phase offers another opportunity to stop the escalation cycle. Continue reminding the individual to use calming techniques and redirect them to a different activity. Show empathy, such as by engaging in active listening techniques. And I will tell you, if this is new to you and let's say new to your child, like my kid thought I was being sarcastic. So I had to explain to him that, no, I'm not being sarcastic. I'm not making fun of you. I'm trying to fix this situation with you. And then slowly he understood that I'm not making fun of him. I'm just showing him empathy. Encourage the person to go to an established safe space if possible, such as their bedroom or the bathroom. It happens.
And that's not always possible either. Like if somebody's agitated at Walmart, you're not going to be able to do that. So you'd have to find like an alternative calming strategy, for let's say when you go to Walmart.
And next of the escalation cycle is the acceleration stage. And the acceleration phase is often when others first notice that the individual is becoming escalated. People start staring. Because this is the point when the individual starts to lose control. They may not be able to effectively reason, problem solve, or communicate verbally. Forcing the person to reason, problem solve, or communicate verbally may lead to an escalation of problem behaviors, like, no good deed, right? Calm down. Tell me to calm down.
Exactly.
Some people in the acceleration phase may be able to respond to brief, clear, step-by-step instructions. If so, give the person the time and the space to respond. It is especially important for you to remain calm at this stage. When I first heard that, I was like, yeah, okay, so my kid is cussing me out and I need to stay calm. Really? Yeah, really. Be mindful of your body language, tone of voice, and content of your speech so that the person will consider you as non-threatening as possible.
And another note of being calm is it can be achieved through practice. Like when I encounter an escalated individual, I immediately calm all the way down. Like it is just like second nature to me at this point. So it is possible to achieve that. It's not easy, but it can be done.
So remember when you met me and I was just like a bundle of nerves, and then you talked me through this stuff and now I can actually, yeah, I'm so glad you're my friend.
Oh, me too.
All right, is this me too?
If you want to.
Yeah. The escalation cycle, the peak stage. Now recall that the peak stage is the point when the individual has totally lost control of themselves. Verbal intervention is not helpful at this point and may instead further escalate the person. Yes, and in other words, water is wet. Your focus should be on ensuring the safety of the individual, yourself, and those around you. Remove any potentially unsafe items such as sharps, or easily breakable items such as glass or ceramic objects. Remove others from the vicinity of the escalated person. I used to break plates, made me feel better. Made a huge mess too. Limit your interaction with the escalated person. Continue to remain calm, takes work.
Mhm.
If the person is displaying behaviors that do not pose an immediate danger to themselves or others, such as screaming or crying or cussing at their mother, just simply shut the door and allow the phase to play out. It's difficult to watch your loved one experience the peak phase. It's heart-wrenching. So your natural inclination may be to intervene, make it stop. However, you should keep in mind that the importance of staying calm and limiting your interactions with the escalated person at this stage, even if doing so absolutely feels counterintuitive. It doesn't maybe feel counterintuitive. It feels like they're getting away with it, but they need to calm down before you can even say a word. And the de-escalation stage, the most important thing to do at this stage is to give the individual the time and space to fully calm down. Continue limiting interactions with the person. I highly recommend going to your car and crying if you live in a small apartment that you share with your child. And then there's the recovery stage. Once the individual has been fully calmed down for about 20 minutes, you should take the opportunity to conduct a debriefing. The purpose of debriefing is to problem solve the incident. This is the time to identify the triggers, evaluate the individuals and your responses during the incident. I'm not an angel. I have let words fly too. He got his temper from his dad and I both, and that's just been a dumpster fire. Discuss how things could have been handled differently and help the individual gain insight into their problem behavior. It is important to continue expressing empathy at this point, such as by utilizing active listening skills when discussing the individual's feelings about the incident.
So, conclusion. So like I said before, this is a lot of this is about preparing or planning during the calm and recovery phases. This can include practicing calming techniques for both yourself and the individual, establishing a safe space for the person, identifying triggers, and making a plan to avoid triggers. One thing that's a good idea is have like family time with the calming skills. So maybe each week you learn a different skill and practice it. That's something you can do. And then there's a technique that I didn't really have anywhere to. I couldn't find the right slide to put it in, but I feel like it's definitely worth mentioning. It's called priming or foreshadowing. So what does that mean? Basically, essentially you are giving person some fair warning that something's going to happen before it happens. So, sometimes if parents, let's say the parent-child thing. Let's say if the parent and child have to leave the house at 10 o'clock. Sometimes at 10 o'clock, the parents are just like, okay, let's go. Right. But sometimes the kid doesn't respond well to that. They may take like forever to find their shoes, or they may have a meltdown. So there's different ways to do priming foreshadowing. One of them is like time reminders or time prompts. So instead of like, okay, 10 o'clock, we're out the door, maybe start at 9:30 and say, okay, you got 30 minutes before we have to go. I would like you to get dressed and put on your shoes. And then at 9:40, so we got 20 minutes before we have to go. How are you doing on getting dressed and putting on your shoes? And maybe at 9:50, you remind them again. So on and so forth. So they're getting some fair warning that something is going to happen instead of having things sprung on them. Timers are good too. Some, especially kids, sometimes they respond really well to timers. You can set an alarm, or you can set like a timer for however many minutes you need. I would say, well, I'd like you to do this, but when the timer goes off, then we're done doing that. Another thing that you can use for priming or foreshadowing is, let's say, especially with like people who are really stuck in their routines, like autistic people or whatnot, if you're going to be doing something that's different from the usual routine, let them know about it. Maybe like the night before or the morning up, be like, okay, today we're going to do this, but I know we usually do this, but we're not going to be doing that. We're going to be doing something else. Let's say if you're going to the store, and usually when you go to the store, you let your kid pick out one thing. Well, today we're not going to do that. We're going to the store, but we're just getting this thing, we're not going to have time to pick out your thing. So let them know ahead of time, so they don't get to the store and get a nasty surprise. Another one that's not on the slide that I just thought of this morning, which is actually really, really important is, while you should reward positive behaviors, you want to make sure you definitely do not reward negative behaviors. So what do I mean by that? Sometimes, I'll use the parent-child example again. If a child has a meltdown, the parent, sometimes knows exactly what the kid wants. And it's so easy to want to give that to your kid, just so we can stop screaming. But does that really help? If you think about it, what is your child learning? Are they learning that, hey, if I have a meltdown, I'm going to get what I want? That's not the lesson we want to teach them, because that just leads to more instances of negative behaviors, because they've learned something. They've learned, hey, this is a way to get what I want. I'm going to have another meltdown. But we don't want that. We want them to learn how to self-regulate from an emotional standpoint.
And can I just add to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So when my child was, I think he was 5 or 6, it was around Halloween time. We were standing in line at Walmart to buy a pumpkin, and he kept hitting his father. And I said, kiddo, if you continue to hit your father, we're going to leave the pumpkin and we're going to walk out the door. And I swear, he's stubborn, just like me. He looked at me and he hit his dad. And I said, all right. I handed the pumpkin to the person behind the register, and my kid starts screaming like a banshee. And I said, we're leaving. And we left. And we didn't have a pumpkin that year, because I just was not having it. Like, no empty threats here. I will walk away. So, and it sucked. Oh, it was terrible. Screaming at the top of his lungs, moving all around like those, what are those?
The wacky wave and fizzle.
Yes,
Man? Yeah.
that's what he turned into, except we had to carry him out to the car. Oh, it was
And
awful.
you weren't selling a car or anything.
No, we were just trying to buy pumpkin to carve. But anyway.
Those are usually outside of car. Car lots. And
Yeah.
whatnot.
Yeah, giving in is, and sometimes I am not going to judge you one iota if you end up giving in because you are on your absolute last nerve. Like, if your kid has set up a trampoline on your last nerve and is doing backflips, do what you have to do, mama, because we're all human.
Yeah.
So anyway, had to put my 2 cents in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So having a loved one who displays escalated behaviors can be emotionally taxing. Seeking support is essential. The individual who gets escalated should receive help from behavioral health professionals, and you should receive support as well, whether for behavioral health professionals or through a support group. And I know we talked about police before, and Annie's not the first parent that I've heard say the police weren't helpful. But if you are concerned for the safety of the individual and others around them at any time, you should reach out to emergency services. It's not a perfect system, but we got to work with what we have.
It's better. It is getting better. They are aware. And at this point, the awareness is kind of all we can ask for at this point, while they sort out how they're going to address this issue.
So are there any questions? I know there's not a lot of time left. I apologize.
I apologize.
Well, I see that there's a couple of questions in the chat. Let's take a look. Oh, those are the documents. Nothing in the Q&A right now, but Danielle is present, I believe. Danielle, can you talk about the CESA team? I'm sorry, Youth Services Network has a response team, a crisis response team.
Oh, are you talking about the National Youth Advocate Program?
That's it.
Yep. They do some mobile crisis response they do both youth and adults in Winnebago County area. I do believe that they're a 24-hour program now.
Yes, so when you make a crisis call, you're not necessarily going to get armed police. You will be able to have a response from people who are trained to deal with escalated behaviors. So eventually it will be completely manned by social service people. Do we have any other questions?
Comments, concerns?
Well, I know we're almost out of time. I really want to thank our two special guests, Ms. Annie Hose Ryan and Christy. And now I'm going to mispronounce your last name, Christy Stardy,
Mhm.
for this very educational presentation. You can always go to our website for more information. And we thank you very much for being here with us.
Well, thank you for having us, Warren.
Thank you.
And Danielle, thank you for co-hosting.
Of course. Thank you.
All right, well, tune in next week for another Leading the Conversation from NAMI Northern Illinois.
Au revoir.